Welcome to the Payment Shed podcast, the weekly podcast that dives into the big topics, trends, and people shaping the worlds of payments, fintech, and business leadership, with your two co-hosts, myself, Grant Evans, and Justin Hanna.
Welcome back to another episode of the Payment Shed. I am Justin Hanna and joined by Grant Evans. Today, we are joined by Oliver Smith, Head of Content for Money 2020 Europe. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, it's great to be here. As you said, my name is Oliver Smith. I'm the Head of Content for Money 2020 Europe, which means I'm responsible for the programming across all of our stages, our speakers, our agenda, and really making sure that we have the best content in the fintech industry when it comes to large-scale conferences.
And what about your career prior to Money 2020? You've obviously had an extensive sort of journey in the fintech world. Can you tell us a little bit about that before taking the Money 2020 job?
So yeah, I've only been here for 7 months, and before that I was a journalist. I started off at City AM as a tech reporter. I moved to Forbes, to Fortune, and as I was a journalist, I gradually discovered, this incredible fintech sector. First of all, in London, when I was at City AM, I went to Monzo's first office opening, and I started to see what was going on, and that really led me down the rabbit hole into fintech. And I absolutely still have that excitement and enthusiasm about the industry today.
So you've been through, the hype cycles, the funding crash, the layoffs, the consolidation, the packaging, the unpackaging, if you like, of fintech that we've seen. Do you think that the tone of your speaker applications and founder conversations with regards to Money 2020, and I know you've only been there 7 months, but I'm sure you've been building or attended yourself, of course, previously. Do you think since sort of 2021, that post-COVID time, as I look at it, the journey that fintech's been on in the last few years has changed dramatically? Do you think you've seen that evolution with the event?
Yeah, I think you absolutely do. I look at the speaker lineup 10 years ago. So in 2016, who was on the main stage at Money 2020 in Europe? Tom Blomfield from Monzo, Nikolai from Revolut, B2C brands, consumer-facing fintechs. And when I think about the kinds of speakers we're programming today for the show in June, it has shifted remarkably. B2B is the new B2C. It's very much where all the action is. Infrastructure, crypto, DeFi. The conversation has changed massively. And I think part of that is the funding landscape. I think the world has changed. I also think traditional institutions have caught up in many ways with the disruptors that we saw back in the 2016, 2017 time. Your high street bank now has an app which some would argue is as good as what's being offered by the challengers. The gap has closed. There's no longer that kind of blue water for fintechs to dive into in the consumer space. And that's why the excitement has in some ways shifted to B2B.
I think some of them have closed the gap. I think you're being quite generous there.
Depends who you bank with.
Yeah, fair.
Do you think that kind of the vibe within that fintech space now is kind of more mature, or is it more cautious, so people aren't necessarily putting themselves out there as much?
I think it's fair to say that there's less sort of crazy experimentation going on. I think post 2023 especially, that was the year where the funding landscape really shifted. We saw those big drops in the numbers. I think that caused a race to profitability, and I think it led to less radical decisions being made, maybe less experimentation in some places. I feel sad about that because I quite like, the early days of fintech when that experimentation was happening. But I think this is the normal cycle of a maturing industry. There's more certainty, at least, on what works now, and more companies are focusing on nailing what's working and following the leaders, I guess. So yeah, things have changed.
And what do you think the biggest mindset shift has been in the last 2 or 3 years? Then, when you think, there's possibly a narrative that founders are just telling better stories here as well, and they are still sort of working in the shadows on some cool stuff or things that maybe slip away from that B2B focus as well. But do you think there's been a big sort of mindset shift, and is there any link to maybe some sort of VC funding and what people are backing, like you said, in that regards as well?
Yeah, I think 5 years ago you had every VC in London had to have a certain element of their portfolio allocated to fintech because it was what it was. Nowadays, the demand for AI and those kinds of AI investments means that what was previously set aside for fintech has been squished and reduced. And now every VC has to have AI in their portfolio. Fintech has done what it can do to adapt to that. You know, a lot of fintechs redress themselves in a different way to try and fit in that category. But it's undoubtedly that funding has been squished. You mentioned mindset shift, and I think the real mindset shift for me and from what I see is around topics like crypto and DeFi. Because again, I remember in 2012 when I was at City AM and we put Bitcoin at $100 on the front page, and it was laughed at, you know, in the office and beyond.
If only.
Yeah. But it was seen as a, you know, and actually for many years it was disregarded and it was downplayed, and mainstream finance and mainstream fintech even dismissed what was happening there. I think post 2020, post COVID, whatever that is, there has been a shift. I think it's seen very seriously now. I think stable coins are seen very seriously. I think the regulators are on board. I think the central banks are on board. I think politicians, when they get their head around it, I think are on board as well. For me and for Money 2020, that's now taking center stage for us. You know, we have a whole section called the intersection, which is all about, you know, DeFi meeting TradFi, that kind of intersection of those two groups. It's amazing because, again, I just think back to 2012 when we were laughing at it. And for many years we were. No one's laughing anymore. It's very serious now.
We've had a couple of guests on recently as well that have they've called out their dislike of the term fintech now, even because I think fintech was portrayed as this new shiny thing, this, you know, challenger, if you like. And now what were those initial fintechs are mature, multi-billion dollar businesses, whatever you want to say there. And maybe now fintech just has a different name. It's disruptor, it's disruption, right? Like, do you think that's a fair comment?
I think it's really fair. I think, you know, putting a brand name on something is quite natural in the kind of evolution of it. We name something until it becomes normal. Fintech, in many ways, when I show my parents or my friends the Monzo app, they don't think of it as special, unique anymore. Maybe in 2016 they did, but nowadays it's a banking app. I've got one of those. I think about other trends that we see at the moment, like agentic payments, for instance. At the moment, we put a label on it because it's unique, it's different. In 5 years' time, they'll just be payments. You know, we won't call them agentic payments anymore. It'll just be the way things work. So I agree. I think fintech as a label is shifting and changing. I think it still has a space maybe within the industry, but certainly for consumers and outside of the industry, it's just finance now, which I think is good.
And so do you think, you mentioned about agentic commerce, you kind of feel like that's the strongest segment that's on the ground right now?
Yeah, I think what's happening in agentic as a whole, and for us at Money 2020, it's one of our 4 pillars of the event. So agentic, AI in the agentic age is one of our 4 content pillars. What is happening in that space has a lot of potential. And there's a lot of excitement around it. I think because we've got big tech weighing in, we've got fintech and traditional finance weighing in, and we've got a lot of genuine engagement and excitement from consumers. It's that kind of perfect coming together of the 3. I think we can all see the potential for what could be. We're definitely not there yet. There's a lot of work to do. But I think what could become there is amazing. And I think about not just payments and commerce, but other elements. I was speaking to someone today about, you know, agentic lending. You know, what happens when lending can happen through the medium of agents and AI? What happens when it's not just commerce and buying, it's actually borrowing and buying? I think there's some fantastic, exciting kind of ideas and concepts that people are working on.
And you get thousands and thousands of submissions for, you know, there's probably been a fair few agentic commerce applications in there this year from payments companies in particular. But when you're trawling for all those thousands of submissions, are there any brands that you're looking at and going, these guys are getting some real traction at the moment? They're generating a huge amount of noise in the market. Maybe these are the next big disruptors.
Yeah. So just to explain the process, how we build Money 2020, before Christmas, we had our call for content, which is where we essentially it's a call for the industry to submit their best and brightest ideas, sessions, speakers, moderators. We really want to hear what's happening in the industry. We have around 1,000 submissions through that process, and then my team go through them with a tooth comb looking for those very ideas you're talking about. It's a long, difficult process, but from that, we're looking to extract the best ideas, the biggest ideas. It's not just about the biggest names, it's also about those that can tap into the kind of content we're trying to program. So I mentioned AI in the agentic age, but we have 3 other pillars. Regulation in the fast lane, which is looking at the speed and change of regulation around the world. We have the great rebundling. You mentioned kind of the unbundling, rebundling of the industries before. We're looking at this coming together of the industry at the moment, when a bank can't just be a bank. It has to do stable coins. It has to do tokenized deposits. It has to do all of these things, this coming together. Money stack rewired, which is looking at the tech stack of the bank, stable coins and beyond. So all of the pieces that are coming together there. So we're looking for submissions that tick a lot of boxes. And sometimes it can be submissions that do things just differently. Do they say, look, the concept for our panel, it's not just a panel, it's a debate. It's not just a debate, it's a big debate. And we're going to have a contentious, like, coming together of 2 sides of an argument. We're looking for all of those pieces.
Do you feel, you mentioned the word banks a couple of times, which is interesting. Do you feel like kind of banks are coming to try and reclaim some of that kind of narrative power at an event like Money 2020, where maybe they had been losing out some of the challenges over the last few years?
Yeah, I think, I think the advantage banks have with some of these trends that we're seeing at the moment, stablecoins being the most obvious one, is that banks can become an enabler for this new sector. So we've already seen 9, it was 9, now it's 10 European banks coming together to form a stablecoin consortium to launch their own euro-denominated stablecoin, led by ING and some other large European banks. BBVA have now joined, making it 10 of them. I think it's showing that banks can actually not just be fast followers or slow followers maybe in some of these earlier revolutions, but actually when it comes to stablecoins especially, this can be beneficial for them and their customers, and they can be part of the leadership of it, which is exciting to see. And it's maybe a slightly different place that banks haven't been in before.
I think we've got more like quick fire questions for you than any guests we've ever had on before as well, because Money 2020 just has so much going on. And conscious of time today, I just want to ask a few quick ones as we kind of round out this initial part of the conversation. So embedded finance, still hot or plateauing for you?
Maturing, I would say. There was a lot of excitement. I know this is supposed to be a quick fire question, so I'll try my best. There was a lot of excitement a few years ago. I think similar to what we touched on with fintech, the excitement has slightly been drained out the room by some of these other topics, agentic AI, stablecoins, etc. But what I think is interesting is that I think AI and agentic is a pathway to actually reinvigorate some sectors of finance that have become maybe slightly less exciting. So open banking, I think, is a really good example. Suddenly open banking data in an AI agentic world becomes a lot more interesting. Like if that data can be unlocked and passed over to an agent, that's interesting. Embedded finance, similarly, a lot of the stuff, agentic payments versus embedded finance, there's a lot of similarities starting to come together here. So certainly maybe not as sexy as it was a couple of years ago, but I think there's still room for it.
Open banking needed the kind of AI boom, I think, didn't it, really? With this being Money 2020 Europe, I'm going to ask you obviously about some of the big European brands that we see. Do we think Europe is still producing more regionally strong players, or are we still producing players that can go on to the global stage and really dominate?
That's a difficult question. Do you mean within fintech, or do you mean startups in general?
I think just generally, and it can be startups as well.
I think, I hate to sound like a broken record because I think people have been saying this for years, but I think Europe still has work to do. We certainly aren't churning out the kind of multi-billion-dollar companies that I think our ambition is. But I think, has progress been made in the last 5-10 years? Yes. But it's a shame that we're still here today asking that question, because that question was being asked a decade ago, probably will be asked in a decade's time. I think the advantage Europe has is that we do turn out very good companies, and we do turn out companies that are maybe not world changing, but certainly regionally impactful, whether in fintech or beyond. But do we, are we yet rivaling the Googles, the Apples, the Amazons of the world? Probably not just yet.
And final one then. So we walk into the room at Money 2020 Europe this year. What's the first impression that we get around the theme that you've gone for? I know you've got the 4 pillars, but what's shouting out to me as I enter the room?
Or I would say our stages, the work and the effort that goes into the 6 stages that we have in Europe this year is phenomenal. These are world-class teams building some of the best stages in the world. Our orbital stage is this fantastic light show in a darkened environment with this circular theme to it. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. And then on the polar opposite, we have Money Lab, which is our new immersive learning stage, beautiful white stage in this small, intimate environment that's really about teasing out learning, encouraging small groups to work together and have deep dive conversations. We have a phenomenal creative team, and I can't wait until
you get us excited about it.
Yeah, it does sound good. You mentioned before around kind of how you get to be on stage at Money 2020. How do you balance kind of that hype versus substance when you're going through all the applications? It must be quite difficult, right? Because everyone's selling something.
Yeah. So what I'll touch on there is depth, because I think a lot of people, when they think of Money 2020, they think about, a really big stage and having high level 50,000 foot kind of conversations, strategic about the industry. Actually, what we get asked for, and most of the feedback is on depth of content. People don't just want the 50,000 foot view. They also want the ground level, how things are working and being put into practice. Part of this is what has inspired Money Lab. And we're also doing some stage takeovers where we dive deeper into certain topics. People really want depth of content. So I would encourage anyone wanting to talk at Money 2020 to actually look inwards at what they're doing, what they're working on, how they're implementing things, what they're building. Try not to follow the trend. Think about how you're adopting AI within your organization. What learnings and lessons are there? That's what I would say. I think depth is what people are really hungry for at Money 2020.
And what themes don't make the agenda that you maybe wish could make the agenda in the future?
That's a good question. So leadership and sort of professional development is one of those topics that I think always deserves more time than it's given. And we would love to give more time to that kind of content. It's hard because our stage time is so valuable and so precious. But at the same time, this year and in the future years, I'd love to spend more of our stage time actually talking about personal development, leadership skills, how people can further their career within our industry. It's not your traditional fintech conference content, but I think it deserves a place. And actually, we have 2 programs not on the show floor, Rise Up and Amplify, which are focused on elevating different groups within fintech and supporting. And they do so much great work on that kind of leadership style content. And I'd love to bring more of that to our stages.
Sure, you could probably get some recruitment companies to sponsor that professional development stage as well. Today's episode is sponsored by ISX Financial. Most growing businesses end up stitching together multiple providers to run their payments and banking, leaving them exposed to cash flow, reconciliation, and even security issues. ISX Financial delivers a unified ecosystem with multi-currency accounts, online payments, real-time UK and EU transfers, and global mass payouts. Within that platform, Paid By provides Pay by Bank with real-time settlement notifications, automated reconciliation, and integrated refund management. One partner, one integration, helping your business transact with confidence. You can learn more at isx.financial. That's isx.financial. And a big thank you to the team at ISX for supporting the show.
So what kind of, in your opinion, generally makes a great speaker at a Money 2020 event?
I think it's a speaker who can put themselves in the shoes of the audience and understand why delegates come to Money 2020. They come to learn, they come to network, they come to sell, some of them, to do deals, meet new people. But I think the best submissions certainly we have are the ones that understand Money 2020. They're not just doing a generic presentation, the type at which, you know, they have in a folder somewhere and they roll out at every show. They're thinking about Money 2020 and how they can do things differently. You know, the best ones, the very best, are the ones that say, look, we're not just going to come and do a presentation or a panel. We're going to come and reveal some exclusive news on your stage with some of our partners in the room. And your audience will be the most special people in the world because they'll be there when we announce that news. You know, it doesn't always happen, but that is magic.
Yeah, I like the partner essence of that. Like, actually have a customer there with you that you can talk through their real world problems with, or things that you've helped them to resolve. And I mean, Money 2020 is not just a 3-day event anymore, right? I mean, yeah, that's all of the events that you have. I mean, it's a media platform. Is it a all year community? Like, how would you define what Money 2020 has become now?
Yeah, it's grown, you know, far beyond what it started off as in 2012 in Vegas, you know, Money 2020 USA, the first show. Then we came to Europe in 2016. And since then, it's gone to Asia, the Middle East, you know, 4 shows across the calendar year, all around the world. And as you're quite rightly say, within that year, we also have podcasts. We have Taking Stock, which is our live show with the New York Stock Exchange. We have a huge amount of stuff going on. We have reports, we have webinars. It has grown so big. I think part of the challenge we have is, you know, it's almost too much to unpack and explain as a delegate. You go on the website. What do these guys do? They do so much. We do so much. So how can we help all of our delegates to understand and explore across what we do? Part of it is our job, you know, to present it better, to say, you know, yes, you're based in Europe and you come into the Europe show, but did you know we have 3 other shows around the world? And actually, if you're expanding into these markets, these shows are the places you can get your foot in the door and start that journey. So yeah, it's a lot, but we're working on it.
And you want people repurposing content beyond the main event. I mean, we obviously made a conscious decision when we were in Vegas last year that we wanted to get our content out real time during the event, because I feel like you got a lot of people that have FOMO anyway that are like, I wish I could be there, but it helps those people to kind of bring it to life. I mean, I don't know if you've done the live, I think you might have done the live streaming for ticket holders before or a week after, but I mean, have you ever thought about doing like some live stream stuff to non-ticketed individuals? Do you do any of that from a content point of view?
We don't. I think FOMO, but also the magic of Money 2020 is having the ecosystem in the room. That is where the value is for everyone at our show. I think, you know, we're happy for people to open the door and show what's going on. But I think we want to make sure that the best place, you know, as we say, the place money does business is in the show, is at Money 2020. That's where you're going to meet people you've never met before, meet people you do know, and you bump into them there and you think, oh, what a small world this is. We really want it to be that ecosystem in one room. I think there's a lot of space for other media and content. That's why we have a podcast. We record episodes on site. We have 2 podcast booths. We'll be recording all week. But really that live event experience, we package that and we want people to come to experience it themselves.
The best way to be at Money 2020 is to be at Money 2020, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Kind of what responsibility do you feel then as a platform kind of shaping that fintech discourse across Europe?
Yeah. So we very much see ourselves as part of that ecosystem. We don't sit in a sort of a box for 11 months and build and then throw it out there. My team, the content team, the first part of our journey starts on the first day after post-show. That's when we start our research phase. So we did 30 interviews last year. We're planning to do 50 interviews this year, speaking to people all across our industry. What are you seeing at the moment? What are the latest trends? What's happening within your organization? What should we be focusing on? Asking those questions, recording all the answers, and building a picture of what is happening. Our research phase lasts about 2 or 3 months, and through that is where we craft our content pillars. So really we pull these from the industry, and everything else filters down from there. So yeah, for us, it's really that research phase is crucial in understanding. And bear in mind that there's not just one research phase, because we have 4 events around the world. So we have 4 research phases across 4 events, and they're all making those phone calls. They're all doing those interviews and pulling all that information together. And the advantage that I have, that my team have, is we can look across Asia. What are the biggest trends in Asia? The USA, North America, everything happening there. And then we get that advantage to pull together and say, right, what's going to happen at our show?
How much influence do sponsors exert on the themes of the shows?
No, that research phase is entirely on its own.
Okay, nice.
And our call for content is open to anyone, sponsors and non-sponsors alike. All of the decisions that we make behind the editorial content on our stages is made by my team independently and is not influenced by anyone else. I think the call for content, I think, some people look at it and go, oh, what's going on? How does the sausage get made? But actually, it is our team going through submissions, ranking and rating them, and trying to just find the magic in there.
No, I like that. I think, some of these events do get that outside influence, and I think staying true to that value is good. It was our first time doing the US one last year as well. We've done Europe lots, but it was noticeably different to me. Like the 2 events felt so, and I'm sure they all have their own flavor, and, audience is different. More people wearing suits in the US actually than in Europe. Standing out in our Nikes, but and I really enjoyed it. So zooming forward then, and I remember AI, was it 2 years ago when it was like AI and we did a whole like AI is everywhere at Money 2020. Is AI dominance in the agenda in some guise the next 3 or 4 years potentially?
Sorry, the question is it going to still be dominant?
Is it still going to be dominating? Because, you had different flavors. You had the AI initial breakout, that AI can help you do this, this, and this. And then we have agentic, and AI is going to constantly evolve and learn, right? So do you think there's going to be a continual theme that AI in some way, shape or form over the next few years is quite heavily set within the agenda?
I think so. But I think what you're seeing, 2 years ago, probably a lot of those presentation conversations were those 50,000 foot kind of ones where
there was no experts.
There was, yeah. And there was there might not have been any actual real world applications. Like, this is what we're hoping to do. This is what we're trying to do. Maybe last year we started to see some of those use cases come out. I mean, by this summer, there are pretty well-known household brands that are going to have even more real-world applications of AI and agentic that all of us will be downloading on our phones and trying out. I think that's the shift that we're seeing. And it's a bit like our fintech conversation earlier, maturity, moving into practice. I'm so excited about some of the things that are going to be shown off and revealed on our show floor, because this is tangible now. It's not intangible like it was before. One of my predictions this year was also about, ChatGPT and whether some of these apps might also start to enter our industry in a way. And I think we are on the verge of seeing that. ChatGPT does health now, so it can connect all of your health data and start to give you recommendations.
It's not a good thing for me.
But they made an acquisition last year of a New York fintech that does personalized financial recommendations. So how long is it going to be before something like that comes along? When I think about Claude and Cowork, we're seeing AI really start to integrate with, these office tools we use. How long before it's integrating with your bank account, bringing us back to open banking? So I'm super excited. It's those tangible real world use cases.
Do you think as these businesses get more mature and build out more products via acquisitions, are we heading towards more and more consolidation as well?
Potentially. I think how this plays out is speculation. There have been many bets over the years that banking would become dumb pipes in this conversation. Fintech, the V1 of fintech was all about that. Your bank, maybe there'll be the back end to your fintech that serves you. That didn't happen, so I'm not going to say that it's going to happen in this revolution, but I certainly think that big tech has for long had an ambition to play in financial services. We've heard that, we've seen that with Apple Pay and the like. I think AI is no different. I think there's an ambition there to move into more and more parts of our lives, and our financial lives. It's some of our most personal, precious data and information. And it's a place that fintech before and maybe AI now can actually help people in the biggest ways. I think about financial advice being the obvious one. Robo advice, again, to talk about other buzzwords that have died a death. Robo advice 5, 6, 7 years ago was a really exciting trend, this personalized financial advice that you'd be getting. It didn't quite work out because the technology wasn't there. AI presents a potential solution to that. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
You see any negatives in the consolidation? Obviously, as an event where you're used to having loads of startups and challengers chipping away, and then we're in this kind of consolidation phase. Like, does that concern you a little bit in the worlds of kind of fintech and startup land?
I think there's kind of two parts to that question. I think fintechs being acquired is not a bad thing. A lot of fintechs are looking for routes of exit. The stock markets, public markets aren't a great route at the moment. Acquisition is a great opportunity. So consolidation, acquisitions is positive for them. I think what we want to make sure is that the whole flywheel is working. And what we don't want to happen is consolidation on one end, but no support on the other end to help these new fintechs start. Because I think it's really important that we do have a startup industry that's flourishing, because those are the new ideas that we do need to come into the mix. Acquisitions are fine as long as new companies are coming along.
Yeah. And from a Money 2020 perspective, is there anything you've seen over, after your short time, but maybe people spoke about beforehand, where you felt maybe there wasn't something relevant for Money 2020 and the business has changed their thought process on that?
Do you mean in terms of people wanting to talk on our stages?
Yeah.
So as in we've thought it's not relevant and they've changed our minds?
Yes.
I guess there have been examples. I think a lot of the time through the call for content especially, companies don't always know the story that they're trying to tell. And we have submissions and we look at them and go, there's a piece here. There's a hint of greatness. And we jump on a phone call with them and we talk it through and we try and understand, is there something that we can make work? I should also say that for us, the diversity of our lineup is super important. And that's both a diversity of ideas, of voices. We don't just want a panel of people from the same company. We want their customers, their clients to be in the room. And we also want a lineup that reflects not just the financial services industry, but the world around us. So gender, ethnicity is super important when we think about diversity. Again, not every company gets that right. Not every submission gets that right. But it's another place where we can sometimes jump in and have a conversation and make sure that our agenda really sings.
And one of the big content pillars this year, AI and the agentic age, obviously, we've talked about it a little bit, but if we're unpacking it in a bit more detail, one thing I was particularly interested in is, we were actually on a podcast not too long ago where we were talking about some of the stuff going on in the US around open banking data, and something that we've said could potentially help is open banking data with agentic and agentic around embedded finance. Do you think Europe is much better positioned than certain other markets because we have the free data here and we're maybe a little bit more aligned around where open banking is going next?
Yeah, I really do. I think, some of the changes happening in the US are fantastically positive. In stablecoins, for instance, what an incredible leap we've seen since the Genius Act passed. On the other end of the spectrum, open banking is going through some major changes, which are really undermining the certainty and the security of what's happening there. I think Europe, one of our advantages has always been kind of the stability of what we have, both regulation and as a market. It's an advantage and a disadvantage because we have the stability, but also we're sometimes slow to evolve, and sometimes those other markets beat us to the punch. But personally, I really hope that AI can be the injection that open banking and open finance needs. I think there was a promise in the late 2010s of what it could be, never quite got there. I hope this could reinvigorate that process.
I think as long as it's kind of supporting regulation, supporting the ecosystem density, right? The talent from a people perspective, I think, is global, but it's how we use that AI to our advantage, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe the US, for right or wrong reasons, was struggling to get over that, but I think there's definitely a future there.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Putting a kind of payments hat on as well, and with you being Money 2020 Europe, I was going to ask you about the EPI and Wero and what we're seeing as far as local payment methods in Europe is concerned. Is there anything in the agenda this year that's kind of leaning into, not big reveal, but I'm just very interested because obviously Ideal is disappearing as a brand, or has disappeared as a brand. That does seem to be gaining more traction than it has done previously. Is that something you guys are keeping a close eye on in the European market?
Absolutely. And I think if you come to the show, you'll probably be hearing a lot about what's going on in that space, and we're really excited to reveal our agenda in a couple of weeks' time. Maybe when your listeners are watching, it'll be time to read it.
So what are the big dates to keep in mind then for Money 2020 Europe as we head towards the event?
So in April, we'll be revealing our agenda. So I'm not going to give an exact date, but it'll be April. Okay. That's when you'll be able to unpack exactly what's happening at the show floor. In March, you'll be able to see our agenda at a glance, which is your kind of high-level look at what's going on across the show. Something that not many people know about is also what happens just outside of the show. So we run a policy exchange program called Policy 20, and that's really about bringing European policymakers into the room just outside the show, behind closed doors, to have conversations about the topics that we're having on the show floor, because they're interested in what's happening too, and they want to learn from each other. And we have a regulatory network, globally across all of our shows, so we can bring observers into the mix to learn and share from each other. Those are conversations that are happening around the show. So yeah, we're really excited to reveal more.
I'm excited to know what the events are this year as well. Because it was at the street party, and Amsterdam's a cool city to have the event in, right? Yeah.
Well, the team are hard. The creative team, as I said, are fantastic, and they've got some big
as well
ideas.
Last year. Annie Mac's hard to follow up.
I'm not saying anything.
As we kind of talk about agentic commerce, I think we talk about nearly every single recording that we do. Do you think there's a future of AI negotiating contracts on behalf of? You mentioned around policymakers, right? Do you think there's a world where AI is going to be involved in them kind of conversations?
On political policy
Correct.
conversations? Yeah. I was in one of my previous roles at Fortune. I was in a sort of a CEO dinner we were doing, and they were talking about the Mario Draghi report that came out a year or two ago. And we asked the question, who in the room has read the report? Zero people had read the report. It was, 100 plus pages. But who in the room has put the report into ChatGPT? A couple of people had, because the reality is that some of those documents are not readable by humans anymore, and we don't have the time and the patience. I think, political policy, a great way to understand some of the regulations and rules coming through, certainly from a layman's point of view, is to put it into these tools. That's how you can get a very quick understanding of what's going on. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Such an interesting observation. And I think that, we're really in an age of wanting everything now, and, financial services and applications should be instant. My data should be available instantly. I'm going to listen to a podcast, but I want to consume it quickly. So I'm going to listen to it in 1.5 or 2 speed. Like I know you listen to them. I can't do it personally. Like I don't want to miss anything, but that is like the have it now, want it now, and get it in, bite-sized chunks so I can consume it quickly. Yeah, very interesting. So we have a final section of the show. I don't know if you've watched or listened to the show previously, but it's called The Shelf of Shame, where our guests nominate something from business, fintech, payments, whatever it might be, that they would quite happily see banished for ever and a day. What would you be willing to nominate for the Shelf of Shame today?
Oh, interesting. Is it like a buzzword?
It could be anything you want.
Oh, I really should have thought about this before the show. I would say, can I, we mentioned embedded finance earlier, and that word and that phrase for me is all finance is embedded. So for me, it's meaningless. And I hate buzzword bingo. So for me, I'd put embedded finance on the shelf.
you going to replace it with a new term or not?
Oh, 2.0? No.
Okay, embedded finance on the shelf. That is controversial at this moment in time, considering how many publications are talking about embedded finance. I do think like that buzzword narrative, though, definitely is like, we do love a buzzword in payments and fintech, don't we?
I think you mentioned there, all finance is embedded in 2026, right?
I think what we're seeking is a new name for embedded
New
finance.
name.
Really. We'll put the old one on the shelf.
We'll put it into
whilst the new one
ChatGPT and see what it
pairs.
tells us.
There you go.
Amazing. Oliver, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you, get in contact with you and the team?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place, Oliver Smith, or go to money2020.com, Europe, and come and have a look at the show. And we'll see you in Amsterdam in June.
You will indeed. We are looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.